First of all, let's kick off. Regardless of where you sit politically or how you feel about immigration, Priti Patel's announcement that we will start sending unauthorised asylum seekers on a one-way ticket to Rwanda will have got your attention. Some would say that was the point. It stopped us talking about Partygate. But this has clearly been a long time in the planning, and with the UK paying £5 million a day to house asylum seekers in our hotels, something clearly had to be done. But is this the solution? Is this perhaps another unworkable example of Boris Johnson's utopian thinking? Another garden bridge which cost £53 million and never got built. Boris Island, remember that? His airport on the Thames he was going to build? And what about the £2.6 million press briefing room at number 10, which is presumably now used for parties only? So, panel, is this immigration plan genius or sheer unworkable madness? Lisa, I will come to you first. First of all, it feels like one of those stories. It's like, where were you when you heard? Where were you when you heard that we were going to send?
Well, I was actually here.
Oh, were you?
I was with Michelle a few weeks ago, and she just sort of said, there's this story that's floating around about Rwanda.
And you thought, is it April the 1st?
Yeah, well, and I just thought, no, that's never going to happen. That's, you know, it just sounds ridiculous. It sounds absolutely crazy. But do you know, today, when I've been coming here today, I've just got my head in my hands thinking how much more money is going to be wasted on these, you know. I had this debate with Michelle last time I was here. Yes, there are issues around people trafficking, but there has got to be a better way than these mythical flights that's going to take people to Rwanda, which I actually don't think is ever going to happen. I think it will be a garden bridge.
Well, maybe, Ben, but I mean, clearly, for me, when I heard this story, and you know, we didn't tackle it on when I was here on Friday, but I was quite glad because I needed a little bit of time to get my head around it as well. And it's almost like they sat around in the Home Office and said, which country has the worst PR problem will become the most unappealing place for people to go? I know. What do people associate with mass genocide, with terrible political corruption over the years? Yeah. Let's go for Rwanda. That'll be the deterrent.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, the policy fails even before you get to Rwanda. It's complex and it's vastly expensive. Yeah. What you didn't say in your opening remarks, which is, you know, I think pertinent to the debate, is that it only applies to single men.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, at most, that's going to be a deterrent to single men. So what we're, in effect, doing is encouraging more families and children to come across the channel. And no doubt lots of single men will come under the cover of families. And once they're here, there'll be huge judicial disputes, legal challenges and so on to any deportation instruction that's issued. So I'm with Lisa. I think I'll be surprised if we see any people getting on planes going to Rwanda. If we do see a few going there, it's going to be at vast expense. It's not going to be a deterrent. And then you've still got all the problems of what might happen to them in Rwanda, all the optics with this Tory government, which this Tory government would have to face in 6 to 9 months, when the inevitable stories of human rights abuses for the refugees that would otherwise have been happily ensconced in the UK, you know, in Rwanda, facing a government which, as you say, Bev, has a history, perhaps not unique, but certainly, you know, up there at the top of human rights abuses. I mean, you couldn't make this up.
No. Well, somebody did. Somebody has made this up. I think that's the point. Someone somewhere has sat in a room and gone, I know, this is a great idea.
Let's get everybody talking.
It's like something out of Brass Eye, isn't it? Like, it genuinely seems like satire. Who thought it up, Joe, and why?
Well, I imagine probably David Canzini, who's the new whiz kid in number 10, to get the pressure off Partygate. But did you know, as you can't make it up anymore, that apparently under this agreement in the small print, we are going to take refugees in from Rwanda. So those who fled war or persecution and were granted asylum status will be able to come to the UK under a reciprocal scheme. But, I mean, you know, the problem is the morality is what's been taking up the front pages and the discussion. And I think there are very, very big questions about the morality of this. But I absolutely agree with them. This won't happen. It's completely unworkable. Yeah. And it starts with sending people to a small village in Yorkshire where the local people and the local MP didn't know anything about it. And what's to stop people just absconding? I mean, it's not... Unless you've got a notice up saying, do not get on this boat because you could end up in Rwanda, how's it going to stop anything? It's not tackling the problem.
Well, presumably, I guess the idea is that the people traffickers who are in communication with the desperate souls that want to leave their countries, whether you consider them to be desperate souls or whether you consider them to be economic migrants, they want to leave those countries. Are the human traffickers going to be saying to them, well, I can get you to the UK, but then you're actually going to end up on a flight to Rwanda?
Of course they're not.
Of course they're not.
No.
So how do they
in
find
the small
out?
print, you mean?
And also, you know, I'm assuming that people trafficking is a very lucrative business.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure they're not going to be giving that business up very easily.
No.
So I think, like Ben said, there will be, you know, a swap. Well,
But it's disgraceful on so many levels. Israel tried it and had to abandon it.
Yeah. Australia still does.
Australia does it, but Australia's got a slightly different thing in the repelling.
Yes.
You know, but that was another bonkers idea.
And
that came
Australia
out.
has bilateral agreements with the countries from which these people come, firm bilateral agreements which are adhered to. You know, unlike the bilateral agreement we have with France, which is observed in the breach, the French don't fulfil their obligations to the United Kingdom.
It's
under
going
the
to be,
agreement
but
we have with them.
because we've all been talking about it, if you're going to throw, there's the dead cat. If you're going to throw a big news story out to distract from something else, and then we all talk about it, but then it doesn't become enacted, that's even worse for the government.
But
isn't
you
it?
know
But
what's
it's
going to
not,
happen?
though, but
Sorry,
this is
Jo.
Boris Johnson's history. I mean, as you said
It
in
is.
your
Yeah.
introduction, we've had the Garden Bridge. What a waste of money that was,
Yeah.
and it didn't
53
happen.
million
We were
Yeah.
going to have a bridge between Ireland and Scotland, weren't we, to
Yeah.
avoid the hard border. We've had so many harebrained schemes. We've had the idea of putting barrages in the channel, quite what that would have done to the ferries when they were sailing, which, of course, they're not at the moment, thanks to P&O.
Yeah.
You know, all of these bonkers ideas. And meanwhile, we're now putting more naval ships into the channel. It is international maritime law that you have to help people in distress. So actually, you're making it much more attractive to people.
Well, if it does work, if this does work, I mean, listen,
it works.
I know you're all saying,
it works-
come on, guys, let's be optimistic.
If it works, it'll be the first complex.
I can't be optimistic. I mean, you know, I am not a Conservative voter or fan.
Yeah.
But I have heard David Davis speak on this. And, you know, people in their own party are saying it will be cheaper to put people up in the Ritz Hotel for a year and send their children to Eton. And
I don't know if it's that expensive.
Well, no, it can't be. I mean, if it's a processing and a one-way ticket to Rwanda, it can't be that.
But I'm not sure who this policy is aimed at.
It's aimed at the front pages to
Yes.
stop us
I am
talking
going
about
to be.
Partygate.
I'm going to have a little more faith that there is a bit more meat on the bones of this story than you guys are describing. So, Rwanda, it is a country the size of Belgium, roughly, with a high population density of about 13 million people. The average age of the Rwandans is 19 years old, which is remarkable. So you can see why they would want people to be there to increase their working population. It is a World Economic Forum centre for the Fourth Industrial Revolution, Ministry of Information, Communication, Technology and Innovation. They are one of the global leaders in that area. They want to be. They're not yet. OK, but there are people in power who have huge ambitions for Rwanda to be on the map in terms of a communication centre, technological centre. Maybe there is something good in this. Maybe these immigrants will get off in Rwanda and have a wonderful life.
But even the Rwandan government doesn't believe in the plan. And the reason I say that is part of the detail, and I'm very grateful to Jo for pointing out the reciprocal nature of the refugees, but another part of the detail, which as a businessman absolutely strikes me right between the eyes, is that the Rwandans wanted payment up front.
Yeah.
We have just paid them £120 million
Oh, we are
to
such
sign
idiots.
on the dotted line. We're such idiots.
We are such idiots.
If the Rwandans believed this was a long-term, fruitful plan out of which they could make good profits and money for Rwanda,
or have decent people there.
they wouldn't have required that 120 million. And to put that into context, Rwanda has a GDP of about 10 billion a year. So that's over 1% of their GDP. It's a massive influx of capital. Why wouldn't they sign the deal?
Yeah.
And who's
Of
going
course.
to police it? You know, we know from anecdotally from the Israeli experiment that people were taken over there and then they just disappeared. And some of them disappeared. And in December, only a few months ago, Julian Braithwaite, who's Director General for the Europe at the Foreign Commonwealth Office, actually spoke in Geneva and said, "We remain concerned, however, by continued restrictions to civil and political rights and media freedom. And on the Foreign Office's own website, you are advised not to go to Rwanda if you're gay or transgender."
Yeah, yeah. But, you know, meanwhile, what I think we need to talk about is this government's mass loss of money. You know, the money.
The wastage is phenomenal.
And meanwhile, we've got people that are afraid to put the kettle on.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
we've got, you know, lack of doctors, dentists,
NHS waiting
you know,
poor
housing.
On the
housing.
All I will say, though, is, OK, so we're doing exactly what Priti Patel has been complaining about in the press today, because she said everybody's lining up to criticise this, but none of you are telling me what I should be doing instead.
Well, it's very, very simple. It's very, very simple. You have to police your borders at the border. Yes, we have a complex border because it's fluid, literally fluid, but you've got to police the border at the border. We have a bilateral agreement with France. They've had £250 million of us, and we've had nothing to show in return. And we have to make sure the French adhere to their obligations. If they don't do it, then the Royal Navy needs to tow these people back. This is where my fellow panellists are going to absolutely shake their heads at me. We've been in violent agreement so far. No. But we need to pass whatever law we need to domestically to break, if necessary, international law to take these people back to France. You cannot police There's no point trying to deal with the problem when it's already come home. You've got to deal with it at the border.
£500 million to France to deal with it.
So go and talk to France and sort it out there. That's where.
But we've tried talking, Joe. They don't do it.
I mean, I don't want to go down the Brexit route, but actually, when we were part of Europe, we had a little bit more sway than we do now.
Well,
now we have the freedom, right, to not have. That's why Rwanda.
But you know, if we can't police an island, then you know there's not a lot of hope for. This has been going on for a long time. The other thing, I mean, is. Given that the Home Office can't even get it together to sort out visas for Ukrainians that we're welcoming with open arms, I have absolutely no faith that this totally
We're back in violent agreement again.
Unfit for purpose government department couldn't
I
ever
agree.
process.
The Conservatives obviously think this is a vote winner. They think this is going to
win Bev, this is how it's going to play out. This is how it's going to play out. 6 weeks from now, everyone would have forgotten about the Rwandan policy. Hopefully Partygate will be in the distance in the rearview mirror. No one will be challenging him on the fact that Rwanda didn't work. People will go on complaining about the illegal migrants coming across the channel, but Rwanda will be forgotten. And that's what Boris is counting on. It was a great reminder you did at the beginning of the programme over all his other cockamamie failed schemes, because we don't really talk about them, do we? But that is Boris Johnson.
It is. It's the utopian thinking.
Which some would say
it's not utopian.
But that's sort of what he... But the grand ideas that are unworkable is what I mean.
Yeah,
this idea that we can...
Well, it's good to have ideas. It's good to be bold and ambitious and think outside
but not
the
with
box and all of that.
Money.
Not with taxpayers' money. And also... We know he's got absolutely no attention to or interest in the detail. Priti Patel has had to sign the order to overrule her permanent secretary, who has said there is nothing to prove that this will be a deterrent or that it is value for money. Now, it's appalling that it comes down to only being considered on value for money terms, not humanitarian or any other grounds. But it is absolutely disgusting. This country, under Boris Johnson, is a disgrace.
Well, watch this space, ladies and gentlemen.